Learn how to connect your sentences like native speakers do. More specifically, let's find out how to use despite and in spite of in English. If you don't know me very well, I'm teacher Prix, and here on my channel, I help students at an intermediate level to go from stuck to speaking and finally talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime in English. Consider subscribing or perhaps sharing this video with a friend. Now, guys, connectors, linking words. You will not impress people around you if you don't improve the quality of your sentences. And to improve the quality of your sentences, you need to connect your ideas more efficiently. And that's the purpose of connectors, conjunctions, linking words in general. If you need to express yourself in a more professional manner, if you want to level up your career and speak more confidently, to show that in your speaking skills, it is important to understand how to link your ideas, how to show contrast, how to add information, how to show results. And I intend to come here with many more videos similar to this one that I'm posting today, to show you how to use different words to express yourself in English. Now, that being said, the first one, despite and in spite of, well, actually, I'm going to talk about both and show you examples, common mistakes, and how to form your sentences while using these two words, because even though they share the same meaning, they are used in a slightly different way, and that's the goal of this lesson. Now, they are both used to show contrast. So that is a very simple definition. They will show contrast between two ideas. So they're very similar to even though, although, or but in a more basic explanation. Of course, there are differences, and the more you study how to connect sentences, the more you will understand the differences between them and how they are relevant in everyday communication, depending on where you are. So the purpose of this lesson is to show you how to describe your ideas while you're using despite and in spite of. So here, look at this example, which is correct, by the way. Our team worked really hard, but we failed to meet the deadline. Can I use but? Of course you can. Go for it. But how can we level up? Despite working really hard, we failed to meet the deadline. So we worked hard, but we failed to meet the deadline. So these are the contrast ideas. We worked hard. So typically we expect to achieve the goal, to reach the target, to meet the deadline, but it didn't work. These are the contrast ideas, okay? That's the contrast I'm trying to show. So I can use despite. I do make some changes, pay attention, but we failed. Our team worked really hard, so I have to make some changes in my sentence. When you're using different connectors, it will not be possible, it won't be possible to write exactly the same thing or say the exact same thing when you're trying to use different connectors. So that is important to keep in mind. Despite working really hard, we failed to meet the deadline. Okay? Now, a few more explanations. As I said, it means although or even though, and it introduces a contrast between two ideas, and it shows surprise. It does show a surprising contrast between what happens and what is expected. So it's not that we always get the results when we work hard. Unfortunately, life is always trying to teach us a lesson. So that doesn't always work. But what is the intention here? It's typically what we expect. So our expectation is to succeed, to do well, to get something done. And here is the surprising effect, the surprising contrast. We want something and we expect something. Nevertheless, something else happened. And that's the idea of despite and in spite of, okay? And the structure is typically where students fail to understand. So look at the structure here. You cannot use a full clause. That is actually where the mistake is. You cannot use a full clause. What is a full clause? Subject plus verb. I go. She studies. My boss likes. I can't do that with despite and in spite of. I have to make changes. So look at the example I wrote here. Despite my brother likes soccer, I can't say that. In spite of my brother likes soccer, I cannot say that, because with the structure of despite and in spite of, that is not possible. Unless I use a combination of words with despite and in spite of, which is the fact that, then it's possible. I will talk about this further down the line in this video. So look at the changes I made to be able to use despite. Despite liking soccer, my brother doesn't like going to stadiums. So I can't say despite my brother likes soccer. I can't. In spite my brother likes soccer. I can't. But I can say although my brother likes soccer, then it's possible. I can say even though my brother likes soccer. I cannot say but my brother likes soccer. I have to make changes. My brother doesn't like going to stadiums, but he likes soccer. Then I can. But even when I am making this change, I am also changing the stress, where I am placing emphasis, the part I am placing emphasis, okay? So it's important to note that every English word, especially when it comes to grammar, has a purpose, okay? I will talk further about the structure. Stay with me. So in spite of, now it's a negative example, and I will come back to the negative example. And by the way, if I were using in spite of, I could do the same thing. In spite of liking soccer, my brother doesn't like going to stadiums. My brother doesn't go to stadiums. If I want to avoid repeating like, now that I'm paying attention, my brother avoids going to stadiums. That's good. My brother hates going to stadiums. There you go. Then with in spite of, now it's a different example. In spite of my manager doesn't have time, I cannot say that. I cannot say that with despite. I cannot say that with in spite of. Unless I make some changes, I will show you in, stay with me, I'll show you. So what do I have to do? Look at the change. In spite of not having time, my manager always participates in our weekly staff meeting. Oh, now it's okay. So in spite of my manager doesn't have time, I use not. Then it's possible. And I use the gerund. So you can use verbs, and you will use verbs. But you will have to place the verb next to despite or next to in spite of in the gerund form, in the ing, just the verb plus ing. In spite of enjoying, in spite of eating a lot of food, I never gain weight. Not true. Does that happen to you? Can you eat a lot and not get any weight? That's not my thing, actually. I do burn calories really fast. However, I cannot count on that all the time. I need to be careful. Moving on, my friends. Now, typically what we use after despite or in spite of is, well, a noun. I can use a noun. I can use a pronoun. I can use the gerunds. I'm talking about verbs plus ing. And when I'm talking about nouns, you will see that in many situations, I will need an adjective to make my sentence more complete. Despite dedication, despite her dedication, pronoun, possessive pronoun, okay? Possessive adjective, excuse me. Despite my patience. So I can use a noun next to despite, but in many cases I will need something more like an article. Despite the stress in big cities. And I can make this now even longer. I can make a group of words, okay? The sky is the limit, guys. Despite the unnecessary load of work, I intend to work here. I intend to stay in this firm for a few more years because I want to gain more experience. See? Despite the unnecessary load of work. Wow, that's longer. It's possible. The unnecessary adjective plus noun. The unnecessary load of work. So don't assume that I say now and it's only one word. You need to think about the other grammar lessons I hope you studied. Articles, Possessive adjectives, my, your, his, their, okay? Maybe a group of words. Maybe you need more than one noun to describe your idea, to form your sentence. And that's where students typically get lost because they don't practice this. They stay in their comfort zone studying the simple sentences. This is something I changed with my students in the academy, okay? So despite the stressful environment, so the now is environment, but I wanna emphasize stressful. Despite the stressful environment, Andrew was able to do an excellent job in the finance department. So it was a stressful environment. But despite the fact the environment was stressful, I will talk about this, he was able to pull off an amazing job. There you go. I used a phrasal verb. I changed the sentence, but that is possible. Alice is an excellent candidate in spite of her temper. Ooh, so in spite of her temper, she is an excellent candidate. So here I changed. I started with Alice is an excellent candidate. I can change the position of the ideas. Pay attention to the contrast. But I say that she is an excellent candidate in spite of her temper. Okay? Alice is an excellent candidate, but she has a temper. I can say that. Alice has a temper, but she's an excellent candidate. Although Alice is an excellent candidate, she has a temper. Even though she has a temper, Alice is a great candidate, so we should consider her. See? The possibilities of combinations, the possibilities are endless. So keep that in mind. This is an excellent practice, by the way. Despite her short temper, Alice is an excellent candidate. So you see, I can use both, the same idea, but I do make some changes, okay? Now, what is the difference between in spite of and despite? In written language, despite is a little bit more formal, okay? Despite is typically a bit more formal. I prefer despite. I'm just talking about my preference. I've seen native speakers using in spite of in both written and spoken language. In written language, despite is slightly more formal, okay? I see native speakers using despite a lot in spoken language. So both are good to go. Always analyze the situation. That is essential. Okay, guys? And before we continue, make sure to subscribe to my channel. If possible, share this video with a friend. And if you want to, support my job here on social media, consider getting my study plan cycle. This is an excellent plan to help students organize the way they study, which is key if you want to be a successful English speaker who can talk to people anywhere, anytime. Link in the description of this video. Check it out, but let's keep rolling. Despite the fact or in spite of the fact. In case you want to use a full sentence, what is a full sentence? I have a subject and I have a verb and the object if necessary, okay? That is a full sentence. And in case I want to do that with despite and in spite of, I can. But I will need to say despite the fact that, or in spite of the fact that. Do native speakers use them? Yes, they do, okay? Then you need to analyze the level of formality. If it's really necessary to do that, then conversation context is key, okay, guys? So you may not always hear these options, but they do exist. So it's interesting to take a look at them, okay? So despite the fact she studied hard, she failed the test. In spite of the fact that it was raining, we went hiking. So you see, then I make a regular sentence. In spite of the fact that I was tired, I managed to have 2 meetings in the morning, even though I was tired. I was tired, but I was able to have 2 meetings in the morning. Possibilities are endless. I can make the same sentence with many different connectors, okay? I was very tired this morning. Nevertheless, I was able to pull off 2 meetings and close 2 deals. So it's possible. You need to study more about how to connect sentences if you want to impress people around you, if you want to become a more efficient English speaker. So that's possible. And please, please, please do not add the preposition of next to despite. No, it doesn't work. There's no preposition of, okay, next to despite. Only in spite of, then yes, then you can go for it. Now, negative sentences, just add not. Okay? I'm not talking about despite the fact or in spite of the fact. If you want to describe a negative sentence with despite the fact, then it's a regular negative sentence. Despite the fact that she didn't study hard, she managed to get the highest score in the most difficult exam at the university. So you see, despite the fact that she didn't study at all. So regular negative sentence, okay? Now here, what I mean is you will add not next to despite or next to in spite of. And then follow that structure, or a noun, or an adjective plus noun, or a verb in the gerund, okay? Despite not having time, my manager always participates in our weekly staff meeting. So despite not going, despite not doing, despite not liking my videos, I still like you very much. And I will always be back with a different lesson. That is cheesy. Okay, fine. Don't be angry. You don't need to hit the like button. I don't want you to feel any pressure whatsoever to hit the like button. I want you to learn, okay? That's all I want from you. In spite of not having time, my manager always participates in our weekly staff meeting. So you see, same idea, same sentence. Add not after despite or in spite of, okay? Now, some examples. And guys, if you want to understand this, you have to create something I always repeat to my students. To learn a lesson, I must use it. To learn a lesson, I must use it. I correct their examples. I correct their English speaking on my platform, because if you want to be fluent, you need guidance. And that's what I give to my students. So after watching this lesson, take the time to create examples of your own, okay? But look at this. He was tired, but he went to work. Despite being tired, he went to work. In spite of being tired, he went to work. Now, these are basic sentences. How can you level them up? How can you add more context? How can you talk about your work? That's the goal of learning to connect sentences like native speakers do. But you have to start somewhere. Start easy like Sunday morning, and then level it up, okay? They lost the game, but they were happy. Despite losing the game, they were happy. In spite of losing the game, they were happy. It was expensive, but I bought the house I wanted. Despite the price, I bought the house I wanted. See, I changed. It was expensive, but I bought the house I wanted. Despite the price, I bought the house I wanted. Now here, even though I am not using expensive, simply by using the price, despite the price, of course I can conclude, I can assume, I can understand that it was more expensive than I would like it to be. So despite the price, I bought the house I wanted. See? In spite of the high cost, I bought the house I wanted. A little bit more formal, but possible. She was sick, but she went to the party. Despite being sick, she went to the party. Now, in spite of her illness, in spite of her illness, she went to the party. Now, here using in spite of her illness is a little bit more sophisticated. And depending on the situation, it may sound formal because you're being sophisticated in the wrong place. So always analyze that. Something I always teach my students is, you want to be sophisticated? It's the freaking barbecue. July 4th. Why do you want to sound so sophisticated? So analyze context and use these lessons wisely. Other than that, my friends, like, share, subscribe, get my study plan or my speaking exercise ebook, especially if you study alone. And I'll see you next time. Bye.